You betrayed me without blinking. Now it's your turn to suffocate. You'll pay for what you did, brick by brick.
The dashcam footage changed everything at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd installed it in Claire's SUV 3 months ago after someone keyed her door at the grocery store. Motion triggered, night vision, the works. Just wanted to catch vandals. Instead, I caught my wife's mouth wrapped around Derek Voss in the back alley behind Morrison's diner. My coffee went cold in my hands as I watched the small screen in my garage office. 15 years of marriage reduced to grainy pixels and muffled sounds through her rolled-down window. Derek's campaign stickers were plastered across his Lexus bumper. Integrity you can count on? I replayed it 7 times. Each viewing stripped away another layer of the man I thought I was. The 8th time, I saved the file to an encrypted drive and labeled it Insurance. Claire had been working late more often lately. School board meetings, she'd said. Grant applications, new heels clicking across our hardwood floors when she came home, password on her phone that used to be our anniversary date. Now it was something else entirely. I finished my beer and locked the garage. Inside our house, she was already asleep, her breathing deep and regular. The woman who'd once been my entire world. I stood in our bedroom doorway for 10 minutes, studying her face in the darkness, looking for signs I'd missed. Clues that should have warned me. There weren't any. Claire had always been excellent at math. The next morning, she kissed my cheek and said she'd be late again. Another meeting. "What's the grant for?" I asked, buttering my toast. "Special needs programs," she said without missing a beat. "Derek thinks we have a real shot at federal funding." Derek. She'd mentioned him 6 times in the past month. Old high school classmate who'd made good. City council, now running for state office. I remembered Derek Voss from Millfield High, star quarterback who'd once stuffed me in a locker and called it team building. "That's great, honey," I said. "Really great." She smiled and grabbed her purse. The same purse she'd been carrying to all those late meetings. After her Prius pulled out of our driveway, I opened her laptop. She'd asked me to fix a lag problem last week. While running diagnostics, I'd cloned her hard drive. Standard procedure for recovering corrupted files. At least that's what I told myself. The folders were organized like everything in Claire's life. Color-coded, dated, labeled. But buried in her documents folder was something called Project Runway, not close. Bank statements, invoice templates, grant applications with altered numbers, and a contact list with Derek's name at the top. I copied everything to a drive labeled Christmas 2022 inches and hid it behind the furnace. That afternoon, while changing oil on Mrs. Patterson's Honda, I thought about the numbers I'd seen. The grant applications Claire was submitting requested $847,000 for special needs equipment. The invoices in her files showed purchases of $340,000. Someone was skimming over $500,000. Someone who knew how to make numbers dance. My phone buzzed. Text from Claire, "Running late again tonight. Don't wait up." I drove past Morrison's diner at 9 p.m. Her Prius was parked in the back alley, engine running. 20 minutes later, Derek's Lexus pulled up behind her. I watched from across the street as they talked through their windows. Money changed hands, an envelope. Then Derek drove away, and Claire sat alone for another 10 minutes before heading home. When she walked through our front door at 10:30, I was watching TV. "How was the meeting?" I asked. "Productive," she said. "I think we're really going to help those kids." She kissed the top of my head and went upstairs. I heard the shower running for 30 minutes. When she came down in her robe, her hair was still damp. "Ethan," she said, "do you ever think about our future? I mean, really think about it." "Every day," I said. "Good." She squeezed my shoulder. "Because everything I do for us." That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe. In 15 years of marriage, Claire had never been a good liar. Tonight, she was lying better than I'd ever heard her lie before. Which meant she'd been practicing. The beauty of being a mechanic is that everyone needs their car fixed eventually. Derek brought his Lexus to my shop 3 weeks later. "Brake pads," he said. "Nothing urgent." "Ethan Brody," he said, shaking my hand with campaign-ready enthusiasm. "You probably don't remember me from high school." "Derek Voss," I said. "How could I forget?" He laughed. "Different times, right? We were just kids. Just kids." Like shoving someone in a locker was playground tag. But I smiled and nodded and got to work on his brakes. While his car was on the lift, I made an impression of his key fob in modeling clay. Old trick from my Army days. You never know when you might need to get somewhere you're not supposed to be. Your wife teaches at Millfield Elementary, right? Derek said, sipping coffee from my waiting room. Claire? Sharp woman? Really sharp with numbers. She is, I said. We've been working together on some grant applications. Big money if we can pull it off. Could really transform education in this town. That's what she tells me. She's modest, Derek said. Without her expertise, we'd never have a shot at federal funding. She's got a real gift for making numbers work. Making numbers work. I tightened the lug nuts on his Lexus and thought about that phrase. Derek paid in cash and left me his business card. If you ever need anything, he said, anything at all, you call me. We take care of our own in this town. Our own, like I'd ever been part of his crowd. That evening, Claire came home early for the first time in weeks. She made pot roast and opened a bottle of wine. We ate dinner like normal people, talking about her students and my customers and the weather. She laughed at my stories and asked about my day, and for 2 hours it felt like old times. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face changed. Work? I asked. Just a parent, she said. Worried about tomorrow's test. But she kept checking her phone through dessert. And when we were watching TV, she was typing responses with her screen tilted away from me. I'm going to take a bath, she said around 10. Want company? Rain check, she said. I'm exhausted. I waited until I heard the water running, then checked her phone. She'd left it on the kitchen counter. The password had been our anniversary date for 8 years. Then it was her birthday. Now it was 041587. Derek's birthday. I'd seen it on his campaign materials. Her texts were all deleted, but I knew where to look. Cloud backup. Everything saved automatically. The conversation with Derek went back 6 months. Derek, how much can we move this quarter? Claire, maybe $200K. The state audit isn't until spring. Derek, perfect. The campaign needs operating cash. Claire, this is dangerous. If anyone looks closely. Derek, nobody looks closely at school grants, babe. Trust me. Babe. My wife was babe to Derek Voss. The messages went on for pages, financial details, meeting locations. And buried in the middle, arrangements that had nothing to do with money. Derek, your place tonight? Claire. Ethan's working late. Back door. Derek, can't wait to see you. They'd been meeting at our house, in our bed. While I was at the garage building a life for us. I cleared the browser history and put her phone back where I'd found it. Upstairs, the bathwater was still running. I knocked on the door. Everything okay in there? Fine, she called. Just relaxing. I went to bed and pretended to sleep. When she slipped under the covers an hour later, her skin smelled like lavender soap and lies. Morning coffee tastes different when you know your marriage is over. Bitter. Like it's been poisoned with truth? Claire was getting dressed for work, humming some song I didn't recognize. She'd been humming a lot lately. Happy, energetic. Like she had secrets worth singing about. I might be late again tonight, she said, checking her makeup in our bedroom mirror. Big presentation tomorrow. For the grant? Exactly. She turned and smiled. If this works out, we could finally take that trip to Europe we always talked about. Europe. We'd talked about Europe on our honeymoon 15 years ago, before life got in the way. Before she decided Derek Voss was more interesting than the man who'd loved her since college. That would be nice, I said. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with her laptop and the flash drive labeled Christmas 2022. 6 months of stolen money. 6 months of stolen time. 6 months of my wife becoming someone I didn't recognize. But I recognized the pattern. Claire was good at math, but she was better at systems. She'd created a perfect loop. Submit grant applications for inflated amounts, create fake invoices from shell companies, deposit the difference into accounts linked to Derek's campaign, and keep enough for herself to make it worth the risk. They'd stolen $340,000 so far. The paper trail was buried in legitimate transactions, but it was there if you knew where to look. I made copies of everything and uploaded them to a secure email account. Then I created a new identity. Tom Patterson, school janitor. Fictitious, but believable. Someone with access to administrative records who might notice discrepancies. I found Tessa Morell's contact information on her blog. Local investigative journalist who'd made a name exposing small-town corruption. Her profile said she specialized in financial crimes and political scandals. Perfect. I crafted an email from Tom Patterson. Miss Morell, you don't know me, but I work nights at Millfield Elementary. I've been noticing some strange things in the filing cabinets, grant applications that don't match purchase orders, bank statements that don't add up. I'm not smart enough to understand all of it, but I think someone's stealing money meant for special needs kids. I've attached some documents I copied. Maybe you can make sense of them. Tom. I included just enough evidence to get her attention. Bank statements showing large deposits to Derek's campaign accounts, invoice templates with Millfield Elementary letterhead, grant applications with clearly altered amounts. Then I hit send and went to work. Marty Dunleavy was already at the garage when I arrived, elbows deep in a transmission rebuild. Marty had been my partner for 8 years, solid, dependable, the kind of man who showed up every day and did honest work for honest pay. "You look like hell," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "Didn't sleep well. Claire keeping you up?" He grinned. "Lucky fool. Lucky. If only he knew." "Something like that," I said. I spent the morning working on routine maintenance, oil changes, and brake jobs that didn't require much thought. My hands moved automatically while my mind worked through possibilities. Claire and Derek had been careful, but they'd made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they think they're smarter than everyone else. At lunch, I drove past Millfield Elementary. Claire's Prius was in the staff parking lot. Normal Tuesday, normal life. Nothing to suggest that in a few hours her world was going to collapse. My phone buzzed with an email from Tessa Morell. "Tom, these documents are interesting, but I need more verification before I can publish anything. Can you access payroll records, staff purchase authorizations? I'm particularly interested in any correspondence between Claire Brody and Derek Voss. If what you're suggesting is true, this could be a major story. Tessa." She'd taken the bait. Now I needed to reel her in slowly. I spent the afternoon collecting more evidence, bank records, email printouts, meeting schedules that showed Claire and Derek in the same locations at the same times. I was building a case like a prosecutor, documenting every transaction and every lie. At 5 o'clock, Claire texted, "Working late again. Order pizza if you're hungry." Working late. Meeting Derek in whatever hotel room or back alley they'd chosen for tonight's business. I wondered if they laughed about me. The simple mechanic who went to bed early and never asked the right questions. They were about to learn that simple doesn't mean stupid. Derek's arrest made the front page of the Millfield Gazette. DUI and hit and run, they said. Found passed out in his Lexus outside Murphy's bar with a smashed headlight and paint scrapes that matched a damaged street lamp on Maple Street. I read the article over coffee while Claire got ready for work. She was taking longer than usual, checking her phone every few minutes. "Terrible about Derek," I said casually. She dropped her mascara. "What about Derek?" "The arrest. It's right here in the paper." I held up the front page. DUI. Hit and run. His campaign is probably finished. Her face went white. "Let me see that." She read the article twice, her hands shaking. Derek's mugshot stared back at us from page 1. Hair disheveled, eyes glazed, looking nothing like the polished politician from his campaign posters. "This is..." she started, then stopped. "What?" "Nothing. It's just shocking. I work with him on the grant applications. Work with him." Such a polite way to describe theft and infidelity. "Maybe someone else can take over the grant work," I suggested. "Maybe," she said, but her voice was distant. She was already calculating, figuring out how Derek's arrest would affect their operation. She left for work without kissing me goodbye. Creating Derek's accident had been simpler than I'd expected. I'd used his cloned key fob to move his car from the restaurant parking lot to Murphy's bar while he was inside having dinner. Then I'd waited in my truck until he came stumbling out at closing time, drunk and disoriented. All it took was a bump from behind while he was fumbling with his keys. Nothing serious. Just enough to knock him down and scrape his bumper against the concrete. Then I'd driven away and called 911 from a payphone to report a drunk driver. Derek probably didn't even remember getting in his car. The booze had done most of the work for me. That afternoon, Tessa Morell called the garage. "Is this Tom Patterson?" "Speaking," I said, using the janitor voice I'd practiced. "I've been looking into those documents you sent. This is bigger than I thought. Can we meet?" "I don't know," I said. "I could lose my job." "I understand, but if you're right about this, children are being hurt. Money that should buy them equipment and support is going into politicians' pockets." She was good, playing the angle that would motivate a janitor who cared about kids. "There's more," I said. "I've been collecting things for months." but I need to know you're serious about this story. Completely serious. Can you get me staff emails, correspondence between Brody and Voss? I can try, I said. Give me a few days. That evening, Claire came home early again. She made dinner and opened wine and tried to act normal, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was problem-solving, adjusting her strategy now that Derek was off the board temporarily. How was your day? I asked. Fine. Quiet. The kids were well-behaved. Any word on the grant applications? She paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Everything's on hold now. With Derek's legal troubles, the district wants to review all pending projects. That's probably smart, I said. Can't be too careful with public money. Right, she said. Can't be too careful. After dinner, she disappeared into our home office with her laptop. I could hear her typing for hours. Deleting files, I suspected. Covering tracks. Making sure nothing could be traced back to her if Derek decided to cooperate with prosecutors. But she was too late. I'd already copied everything weeks ago. Around midnight, she came to bed and curled up against me like nothing had changed. Ethan, she whispered, do you love me? It was such a strange question, like she was testing something. Of course, I said. Why would you ask that? Just wondering, she said. Sometimes I feel like we're growing apart. Growing apart. We weren't growing apart. She was moving away from me towards someone else and taking pieces of our life with her. We're fine, I said. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. She fell asleep in my arms, but I stayed awake until dawn, listening to her breathe and planning her destruction. The email arrived at 6 a.m. on Thursday. Tom, I've verified your information through independent sources. This story runs Monday morning. Thank you for your courage. Tessa. I deleted the message and finished my coffee. In 4 days, Claire's world would explode. Derek was already neutralized, sitting in jail waiting for his lawyer to post bail. The campaign was suspended, the money trail frozen. Now, it was Claire's turn. She was in the shower when I left for work. Through the bathroom door, I could hear her humming again. Still happy, still optimistic. She had no idea what was coming. Marty was replacing brake pads on a Ford pickup when I arrived at the garage. You're early, he said. Couldn't sleep. Still having troubles at home? I looked at him. Marty had been married to the same woman for 25 years. They fought about money and kids and whose turn it was to take out the trash, but they were honest fights. Clean fights. No secrets buried in laptop files. Something like that, I said. Want to talk about it? Not yet. He nodded and went back to work. Marty understood that some problems had to be solved alone. Around 10, Detective Reeves stopped by the garage. He was investigating Derek's hit-and-run case, he said. Just routine questions. You know Derek Voss? He asked. Worked on his car a few weeks ago. Brake job. Notice anything unusual about him? Seemed drunk? Distracted? Seemed normal, I said. Talked about politics mostly, his campaign. Right. Reeves made notes in a small pad. You work late much? Ever see anything unusual around Murphy's bar? I'm usually home by 6, I said. Family man, you know? Sure, he said. Well, thanks for your time. Call me if you remember anything else. After he left, Marty shook his head. Poor fool, he said. Derek? Yeah. Built his whole life around that campaign. Now it's over before it started. Maybe it's for the best, I said. Politics is a dirty business. Ain't that the truth? I spent the afternoon working on a transmission that had been giving me trouble for weeks. Sometimes the solution to a complex problem is patience. You strip away the components one by one until you find the broken part. Then you replace it and rebuild everything stronger than before. Claire called around 4. Can you pick up dinner? She said. I'm swamped with grading. No problem. Chinese okay? Perfect. Love you. Love you too, I said, and meant it. I did love her. I loved the woman she used to be before greed and Derek Voss corrupted her into someone I didn't recognize. That evening, we ate takeout and watched TV like a normal married couple. She seemed relaxed, almost giddy. Derek's arrest had probably given her space to think, to plan her next move. She was smart enough to know she needed an exit strategy. I've been thinking, she said during a commercial break. Maybe we should take a vacation, just the two of us. Get away for a while. Where did you have in mind? Somewhere warm, Mexico maybe, or Costa Rica. Somewhere we can relax and reconnect. Somewhere without extradition treaties, more likely. She was already thinking about running. That sounds nice, I said. When were you thinking? Soon, she said. Maybe next month. I have some vacation time saved up. Next month, after the grant money had been laundered and transferred. After she'd figured out how to disappear without leaving a trail. I'll look into flights, I said. Actually, she said, let me handle the travel arrangements. I've got more free time during school hours. Of course she did. She wanted to control the details, pick the destination, manage the timeline, just like she'd controlled everything else about her double life. Whatever you think is best, I said. That night, she made love to me with desperate intensity, like she was trying to convince both of us that we still had something worth saving. Afterward, she fell asleep with her head on my chest, and I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. 2 more days until Tessa's story broke. 2 more days until Claire learned that her husband wasn't as simple as she'd thought. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of October day that promised winter was coming whether you were ready or not. I was shaving when Claire's phone started ringing. Then it rang again and again. Popular morning, I called toward the bedroom. Just work stuff, she called back, but her voice had changed, tight, worried. I finished shaving and found her sitting on the bed, staring at her phone like it might explode. Everything okay? Fine, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Just parent conferences this week. Everyone's anxious. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. Hello, what? No, I can't. I'll call you back. She hung up and stood quickly. I need to get to school early, she said. Crisis with the special needs budget. Crisis. That was one word for it. After she left, I made coffee and waited. At exactly 7 a.m., I opened Tessa Morell's blog on my laptop. The headline made me smile. Millfield teacher accused of embezzling special needs funds. The article was thorough and devastating. Bank records, email transcripts, meeting schedules, financial documents, everything laid out in clear prosecutorial detail. Tessa had done excellent work with the evidence I'd provided. She'd painted the picture perfectly. Claire Brody, trusted educator, had systematically stolen money intended for disabled children and funneled it to Derek Voss's political campaign in exchange for personal kickbacks. The story included quotes from district sources and concerned parents. It made Claire look like a monster. My phone rang at 7:15. Claire crying, Ethan, something terrible has happened. Someone's accusing me of stealing money from the school. It's all lies, but they're saying. Slow down, I said. What's happening? There's a story online about me and Derek. They're saying we stole grant money. It's insane. I would never. Where are you? At school. The principal wants to see me. The police might be coming. Ethan, I'm scared. She sounded genuinely terrified. Maybe she'd started believing her own lies. Maybe she'd convinced herself that what she was doing wasn't really stealing. I'll be right there, I said. No, don't. It'll just make things worse. I need to handle this myself. Are you sure? Yes, I needed to hear your voice. To know you believe me. Of course I believe you, I lied. We'll get through this. I love you, she said. I love you too. She hung up, and I poured another cup of coffee. Phase 1 was complete. Claire was now publicly exposed, professionally destroyed, and legally vulnerable. But she still thought she could fix it. Still thought she was smart enough to talk her way out of the hole she'd dug. She had no idea how deep that hole really was. At noon, she called again. They suspended me, she said. Pending investigation. They changed the locks on my classroom. Ethan, they treated me like a criminal. I'm sorry, I said. That must have been humiliating. The parents are already talking. I saw them whispering in the parking lot, pointing at me. 15 years of service, and they're treating me like... Like what? Like I'm guilty. Are you? I asked quietly. Silence on the other end of the line. Ethan, how can you even ask me that? Because I'm your husband, and I need to know the truth. The truth is that I'm being set up. Someone wants to destroy me, and they're using Derek's campaign troubles to do it. Set up? She was half right. Someone did want to destroy her, but she'd given me all the weapons I needed. Come home, I said. We'll figure this out together. She arrived an hour later, looking older than I'd seen her in years. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled. The confident woman who'd been humming in our bathroom that morning was gone. "They think I'm a thief," she said, collapsing onto our couch. "What do you think?" She looked at me with genuine confusion, like the question didn't make sense. "I think someone hacked into school records and made it look like I was stealing. I think Derek's enemies are using me to get to him." Derek's enemies? Political opponents? Business rivals? People who wanted to stop his campaign? Still lying. Even now, with her career destroyed and criminal charges pending, she was still lying to my face. "Claire," I said, sitting beside her, "I found something on your laptop." Her face went pale. "What?" I pulled out a flash drive and set it on the coffee table between us. Financial records, email chains, meeting schedules, all the evidence that journalist used in her story. She stared at the drive like it was a venomous snake. "I don't understand. I copied everything weeks ago." "While I was fixing your computer." "You were spying on me?" "I was trying to understand why my wife was coming home late every night, why she changed her phone password, why she was lying about where she'd been." She stood and backed away from me. "You went through my private files? Your private files full of stolen money and forged documents. Those aren't—" "I can explain." "Then explain." But she couldn't. Or wouldn't. She just stood there, trapped between the truth and her lies, and finally understood that her marriage was over. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough." "Are you the one who sent those documents to the journalist?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She could see it in my face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You destroyed me. You destroyed my life." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed your life. I just made sure everyone else could see it." She ran upstairs and started packing. I let her go. There was nowhere for her to run that I couldn't find her. Claire was gone when I woke up Tuesday morning. She'd taken a suitcase, her jewelry, and $3,000 from our emergency fund. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. "Don't try to find me. I need time to think." See, time to think. More likely time to figure out how to access the offshore accounts she and Derek had probably set up. Money they'd stolen and hidden for exactly this kind of emergency. I called in sick to work and spent the morning tracking her movements. Credit card purchases showed she'd bought gas in Springfield, 2 hours south. Then a hotel charge in Branson. She was heading toward Arkansas, probably trying to get to Mexico. But she'd made a mistake. She'd used the credit card linked to our joint checking account. Every transaction sent an alert to my phone. Detective Reeves called around noon. "Mr. Brody, we'd like to speak with your wife about the school embezzlement case. Is she available?" "She's visiting her sister," I said. "Family emergency, but I can give her a message. We'd appreciate it if she could come in for questioning." "Voluntary, of course, just to clear up some inconsistencies. I'll let her know." "Also," he said, "we're reviewing the Derek Voss hit-and-run case. Your garage worked on his car recently, correct?" "That's right." "Brake job?" "We're wondering if you noticed anything unusual about the vehicle. Damage, maybe? Or if he mentioned any concerns about driving safety." I thought about Derek's cloned key fob, still hidden in my toolbox. "Nothing unusual," I said. It seemed like a standard maintenance call. "Okay. Well, thanks for your time. And please ask your wife to call us when she gets back." "Of course." That afternoon, Claire's credit card showed charges at a truck stop outside Little Rock. Then a cash withdrawal from an ATM. She was smart enough to know credit cards could be tracked, but not smart enough to disable the automatic alerts. I drove to Branson and found her hotel. The desk clerk remembered her. Attractive woman, seemed nervous, paid cash for 2 nights. She checked out that morning and asked for directions to the interstate. "Did she mention where she was headed?" I asked. "Dallas, I think, or maybe Denver. Somewhere that started with D. Somewhere that started with D. Like Derek." I called Marty and told him I'd be out the rest of the week. Family emergency. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just need to handle some things." "Take all the time you need." "We'll manage here." Marty was a good friend, better than I deserved considering what I was planning. That evening, I drove past Derek's house. The campaign signs were gone from his yard, and the lights were off. but his Lexus was in the driveway. Either he was home hiding from reporters or Claire had contacted him and they were planning their next move together. I parked across the street and waited. At midnight, Derek's front door opened. Claire stepped out, looked around nervously, then hurried to a rental car parked 2 houses down. She'd been inside with him for hours. They were running together, partners to the end. I followed the rental car to the interstate, staying far enough back to avoid detection. Claire drove like someone who'd never been tailed before. Too fast, then too slow, checking her mirrors constantly. She was scared, but determined. She took the exit for Lake Taneycomo. Derek's family had owned property out there for decades, a cabin where they could hide while the legal heat cooled down. Perfect, isolated, private, no witnesses. I drove past the lake road and circled back through the woods. I knew this area from hunting trips with my father years ago. Every trail, every access road, every way in and out. Claire and Derek thought they were clever, disappearing to a remote cabin while their lawyers figured out how to minimize the damage. They probably had money hidden, passports ready, a plan to disappear permanently once the immediate crisis passed. They had no idea I'd been planning their destruction for months. Every detail, every contingency, every possible outcome except the ones where they got away with it. I parked my truck a mile from Derek's cabin and checked my gear. Zip ties, duct tape, a gas can, work gloves, everything I'd need for the last honest conversation any of us would ever have. The storm was moving in from the west, dark clouds promising heavy rain before dawn. Perfect weather for what came next. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking Lake Taneycomo, surrounded by oak trees that had probably been growing since before Derek's grandfather built the place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a great room with a stone fireplace. The kind of rustic retreat where wealthy families pretended to rough it while their staff handled the real work. I'd scouted the property twice over the past month, memorizing the layout, the sight lines, the weak points. The back door had a simple deadbolt that could be picked in 30 seconds. The windows were original 1960s construction, single-pane glass that barely muffled sound. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Claire's rental car was parked beside Derek's Lexus in the gravel driveway. Light flickered through the front windows, probably a fire in the hearth. They were making themselves comfortable while their lives collapsed back in Millfield. Rain started falling as I approached the house, heavy drops that would soon become a downpour. I crouched beside Derek's car and slashed 2 tires with my utility knife. Then I did the same to Claire's rental. If they tried to run, they'd be doing it on foot through miles of rough terrain. The power line ran along a utility pole 50 yards from the house. I climbed it easily. All those years of changing garage bay lights had kept me in better shape than I looked. 1 cut with my wire dancers, and the cabin went dark. Through the kitchen window, I could see Claire and Derek silhouetted against the firelight. They were arguing about something, their voices muffled but heated. Money, probably, or blame. Or who was going to take the fall when the lawyers couldn't make their problems disappear. I tried the back door, locked, as expected, but Derek's family had never worried much about security out here. Rich people's problems usually involved prenups and tax audits, not violent crime. The door frame was old pine, soft enough that a few kicks would split it easily. Instead, I used Derek's own key, the one I'd copied from his fob weeks ago. Simple. Quiet. No property damage to explain later. The kitchen smelled like coffee and fear. I could hear them clearly now through the thin walls. "This is insane," Claire was saying. "We should turn ourselves in." "Make a deal." "And say what?" Derek's voice was sharp, panicked. "That we accidentally stole $500,000? That it was all a misunderstanding? We could claim it was your idea, that you manipulated me." "Jesus, Claire! 5 minutes ago, you were ready to run to Mexico with me. Now you want to throw me under the bus? I want to survive this. My husband already knows everything. He's the one who leaked it to that journalist. He's been planning this for months." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Your husband did this." "The mechanic? He's not as stupid as you thought." "Apparently not." I moved through the kitchen slowly, avoiding the loose floorboard near the refrigerator that I had noted during my earlier reconnaissance. The great room was just ahead, separated by a doorway with no door. They were sitting on the couch facing the fireplace. Derek had a pistol on the coffee table beside him. Smart man. Too bad it wouldn't help him. I stayed in the shadows and listened to them destroy each other. We still have the Cayman account, Derek said. 200,000. Enough to disappear if we're careful. And live like what? Fugitives? I'm not built for that life. You're built for prison even less. Claire stood and walked to the window, peering out into the darkness. Maybe we should split up, she said. Take half the money each. Better odds if we're not together. After everything we've been through? Everything we've been through got us here. Maybe it's time to be realistic. Realistic? Derek laughed bitterly. Realistic would have been not trusting a small-town math teacher with a federal embezzlement scheme. And realistic would have been not trusting a politician who thinks with his pecker. They were turning on each other, just like I'd known they would. Criminals always do when the pressure gets high enough. Honor among thieves is a myth invented by people who've never actually committed crimes. Claire walked back toward the couch, passing within 6 feet of where I stood in the doorway. In the firelight, she looked older, harder. The soft suburban wife who'd kissed me goodbye every morning for 15 years was gone. This was the real Claire, the one who could steal from disabled children and sleep peacefully beside me afterward. I need a drink, she said. Pantry, Derek said. Dad kept a bottle of Jack behind the canned goods. She headed toward the kitchen, toward me. I pressed myself against the wall as she entered, her footsteps soft on the worn linoleum. She was 3 feet away, fumbling through the pantry shelves in the darkness. I could smell her perfume, the same perfume she'd worn on our wedding day. She found the bottle and turned to leave. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. Hello, Claire. She dropped the whiskey. The bottle exploded on the kitchen floor, filling the air with the smell of booze and broken glass. Ethan? Her voice was barely a whisper. How did you find you? Same way I found everything else. You're not as careful as you think. Derek's voice carried from the great room. Claire? What happened? She opened her mouth to scream. I clamped my hand over it and pressed the point of my utility knife against her throat. One sound, I whispered, and this gets much worse for everyone. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded. I took my hand away from her mouth. Ethan, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you stole money from special needs kids? How you screwed Derek in our bed while I was working? How you planned to disappear to Mexico with $500,000? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? She started crying. Real tears, not the crocodile tears she'd used to manipulate me for months. I love you, she said. Everything I did for us, for our future. Our future? You mean the future where you disappear with Derek and leave me to clean up your mess? Claire? Derek called again. Are you okay? I gestured toward the great room with the knife. Tell him you're fine. Tell him you're coming back. I'm fine, she called, her voice shaking. Just give me a minute. Good girl, I said. Now we're going to join Derek. And you're going to help me have a conversation with him. What kind of conversation? The kind where people tell the truth. I guided her back toward the great room, the knife pressed against her spine. Derek was standing now, the pistol in his hand. Put the tool down, I said, pushing Claire ahead of me into the firelight. Derek saw the knife at his lover's back and raised the pistol. Let her go, Ethan. This doesn't have to get violent. Doesn't it? You destroyed my marriage, stole money from children, turned my wife into a criminal. Seems like violence is exactly what this situation requires. We can work something out. Split the money 3 ways. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? I looked at Claire, then back at Derek. 2 people who'd thought they were smarter than everyone else. 2 people who'd underestimated the simple mechanic they'd been lying to for months. I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to face the consequences. And I want you to know that there's still one honest man left in this world. Derek kept the tool trained on me, but his hand was shaking. You're not a butcher, Ethan. I remember you from high school. You were always the reasonable one. The nice guy. The nice guy you stuffed in lockers? The nice guy whose wife you corrupted? That nice guy? That was different. We were kids. And now we're adults. Adults who make choices and live with the results. I pushed Claire toward the couch. Sit down, both of you. Derek hesitated, then lowered the tool and sat beside Claire. They looked like what they were, Two people who'd run out of options and were about to pay the price. 15 years, I said, looking at Claire. 15 years of marriage. I thought I knew you. You do know me. This isn't who I really am. No? Then who are you really? The woman who taught second graders about honesty and sharing? Or the woman who stole their educational funding? She didn't answer. I turned to Derek. And you? Running for office on a platform of integrity and fiscal responsibility. How much did you steal? It wasn't stealing, it was campaign finance, perfectly legal. Lying to federal grant administrators is legal? Falsifying school records is legal? Infidelity isn't illegal, but last I checked, fraud still was. Look, Derek said, we made mistakes, but nobody has to die here. We can disappear. You'll never see us again. That's the problem, I said. I'll always see you. Every time I look in the mirror, I'll see the fool who was married to a thief. Every time I read about political corruption, I'll think about how you got away with it. So, what's your plan? Claire asked. Eliminate us? You'll go to prison? Maybe. But you'll still be dead. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windows. Lightning flashed, illuminating the lake below. It was the kind of storm that washed away evidence and confused witnesses. Perfect weather for justice. I need to understand something, I said, settling into the chair across from them. When did you decide I was too stupid to notice? Claire and Derek exchanged glances. Even now, caught and cornered, they were still calculating, still looking for advantages. It wasn't like that, Claire said. Then what was it like? Walk me through it. When did my wife decide to become a criminal? Derek started to speak, but I pointed the knife at him. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to my wife. The woman who promised to love and honor me until death do us part. Claire wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It started small. Derek needed campaign funds, and the school had surplus grant money. Just a temporary loan. A loan. That's what we told ourselves. And when did the loan become theft? When we realized how easy it was. The oversight was minimal. The auditing process was a joke. We could move money through shell companies and nobody would notice for years. Somebody noticed. You noticed, but you were never supposed to be looking. Derek leaned forward. Ethan, you have to understand, politics requires money. Real change requires resources. We were trying to build something better. By stealing from special needs kids, by finding creative funding solutions. I laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Creative funding solutions. Is that what you called it when you were screwing my wife in our bedroom? Claire flinched. That was separate. That was personal. Personal? You made it personal when you brought him into our house, into our bed, into our life. I never meant for you to get hurt. But you knew I would be. You knew that eventually I'd find out. You just hoped you'd be long gone by then. She nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. So the plan was to steal enough money to disappear, leave me with the debt and the scandal, and start over somewhere else. Together. Yes, she whispered. And if I'd never found out? If I'd been as stupid as you thought? What then? I don't know. We never talked about that. Of course you didn't, because I was never part of the equation. I was just the mark. The sucker husband who went to work every day while you looted our community. Derek was getting restless, his eyes darting toward the tool on the coffee table. Don't, I said. You reach for that weapon, and this conversation ends badly for everyone. So how does it end? He asked. What's your plan here, Ethan? My plan is simple. You're going to tell me everything, every detail, every lie, every stolen dollar. And then you're going to face the consequences. What consequences? I stood and walked to the fireplace, feeling the heat against my face. When I was deployed in Middle East, I learned something about consequences. Over there, when someone betrayed the unit, when someone put good people in danger for personal gain, there was always a reckoning. Justice wasn't complicated. It was direct. This isn't Middle East, Claire said. No, it's not. It's worse. In Middle East, we knew who the enemy was. Here, the enemy was sleeping in my bed. I turned back to face them. You want to know what's going to happen? I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone else. I'm going to make sure you can't run away from what you've done. And I'm going to make sure that when people tell this story, they remember that at least one person stood up for what was right. Derek's hand inched toward the tool. I wouldn't, I said. You're not a butcher, Ethan. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask yourself this. What does a man have left when his wife destroys everything he believed in? What does he have to lose? The question hung in the air between us. Outside, lightning struck somewhere close, and the thunder followed immediately. The storm was directly overhead now. Money, I said. Let's talk about money. How much did you steal in total? Including the Cayman account? Derek asked. Including everything. 700,000, maybe 8. Jesus, I said. $800,000 stolen from programs for disabled children? How do you sleep at night? Those programs were overfunded anyway, Derek said. The money was just sitting there. Sitting there because it was designated for special equipment, wheelchairs, communication devices, therapy programs, things that help kids who can't help themselves. We were going to pay it back, Claire said. When? After you disappeared to Mexico? She didn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to give me the account information for every dollar you stole. Every shell company, every offshore account, every hidden asset. All of it. And then what? Derek asked. Then the money goes back where it belongs, to help the kids you stole it from. And us? I looked at Claire, really looked at her, the woman I'd loved since college. The woman who'd been my partner for 15 years. The woman who'd destroyed everything we'd built together. You made your choices, I said. Now you live with them. Derek's hand shot toward the tool. I was faster. The knife caught him in the wrist, pinning his hand to the wooden coffee table. He screamed and tried to pull away, but the blade was buried deep in the wood. I told you not to do that, I said. Claire scrambled toward the front door, but I caught her before she reached it. She fought like a desperate animal, clawing and biting, but 15 years of marriage had taught me exactly how strong she was and exactly how to restrain her without causing permanent damage. I zip-tied her hands behind her back and pushed her into a chair. Derek's bleeding pretty badly, she said. He needs medical attention. Derek needs to learn that actions have consequences. I walked back to where Derek was struggling with the knife in his wrist. Crimson smear was pooling on the coffee table, but the wound wasn't life-threatening. I'd been careful to avoid major crimson smear vessels. Account numbers, I said. Go to hell! I twisted the knife slightly. He screamed again. Account numbers! This time he gave them to me. All of them. The Cayman accounts, the shell companies, the money market funds, everything they'd stolen, everything they'd hidden, everything they'd planned to use for their new life together. I wrote it all down in a notebook I'd brought for this purpose. Thank you, I said. Now we can move to the final phase. What final phase? Claire asked. I pulled the gas can from my backpack and began pouring gasoline around the room. The smell was overwhelming in the confined space. Ethan, no, Claire said. Please, we'll do whatever you want. We'll turn ourselves in. We'll testify against each other. Anything. Anything except undo what you've done. Anything except give me back the 15 years you stole from me. Derek was trying to work the knife free from his wrist, but every movement sent fresh waves of crimson smear across the table. You're not a murderer, he said through gritted teeth. You're not like us. You're right, I said. I'm not like you. I'm the only honest man left. I pulled out my lighter and held it up so they could see it. Wait, Claire said. There's something you need to know. What? I'm pregnant. I stopped pouring the gasoline. What did you say? I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. We were going to tell you after we were gone. Whose baby? She looked at Derek, then back at me. I don't know. The lighter felt heavy in my hand. A baby. After 8 years of trying, after doctors and tests and treatments that never worked, suddenly she was pregnant. With a child that might be mine or might belong to the man who'd helped her destroy our marriage. You're lying, I said. I'm not. I have the test results in my purse. Show me. With her hands zip-tied, she couldn't reach her purse. I grabbed it from beside the couch and found the pregnancy test. Positive, clear as day. 2 lines that changed everything, or maybe they changed nothing at all. Congratulations, I said, dropping the test into the puddle of gasoline. You're going to be a mother. Ethan, please, if there's any chance this baby is yours. There's no chance, I said. We haven't had sex in 2 months. You were too busy with Derek. That's not true. 2 months And 3 days. I've been counting. I could see her doing the math in her head, trying to remember, trying to construct a timeline that might save her life. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. I flicked the lighter. The flame danced in the darkness, reflecting off the puddle of gasoline at my feet. You destroyed everything I cared about, I said. My marriage, my trust, my faith in human decency. You turned me into this. We can fix it, Derek said. We can make it right. Some things can't be fixed. I dropped the lighter. The fire spread faster than I'd expected, racing across the gasoline in bright blue flames. Within seconds, the entire room was engulfed. Claire screamed. Derek thrashed against the knife, pinning his wrist to the table. The smoke was already getting thick. I walked to the back door and opened it. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the flames. Behind me, I could hear them calling my name, begging, promising things they could never deliver. I stepped outside into the rain and didn't look back. The flames were visible for miles, a bright orange glow against the storm clouds. I drove slowly down the winding lake road, watching the fire consume Derek's family cabin in my rearview mirror. By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, there would be nothing left but ash and charred timber. And the truth. Finally, the truth. My shoulder throbbed where Derek had managed to slash me with a piece of broken glass during our struggle. Nothing serious, but it would need attention. I pulled into a truck stop outside Branson and cleaned the wound in the men's room. The cut was shallow but long, running from my collarbone to my bicep. It would heal, but it would leave a scar. Good. I wanted to remember this night. At a payphone behind the gas station, I called Detective Reeves. This is Tom Patterson, I said, using the janitor voice one last time. I found something you need to see. Tom, it's 3 a.m. Claire Brody and Derek Voss. They had offshore accounts, Cayman Islands. I have the numbers. I read him the account information from my notebook, every digit Derek had given me while the knife was buried in his wrist. How did you get this information? Reeves asked. Does it matter? The money's there. $800,000 stolen from special needs kids. Now you can get it back. Tom, where are you calling from? I hung up and drove north toward Millfield. The radio was playing soft rock from the 80s, songs that reminded me of high school and simpler times. Times when I thought I understood the difference between right and wrong. I still understood the difference. I just learned that sometimes right and wrong weren't enough. Sometimes you needed justice. Real justice, the kind that couldn't be plea bargained away or reduced to community service. The sun was coming up by the time I reached the city limits. Millfield looked the same as always. Small houses with big yards, American flags on front porches, the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, except they hadn't known Claire's business, or Derek's. They'd been fooled by smiles and community service and campaign promises, but they wouldn't be fooled again. I parked at the garage and sat in my truck for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. In a few hours, Marty would arrive and we'd start another day of honest work, oil changes and brake jobs and transmission repairs, simple problems with clear solutions. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Lake House fire under investigation. 2 bodies recovered. Arson suspected. 2 bodies. Claire and Derek hadn't escaped after all. Maybe Derek's wound had been worse than I'd thought. Maybe they'd been overcome by smoke before they could free themselves. Maybe justice was more thorough than I'd planned. I deleted the message and went inside to wash the smell of smoke from my hands. 3 days later, the FBI announced they'd recovered $847,000 from accounts linked to Claire Brody and Derek Voss. The money would be returned to Millfield Elementary's special needs programs. The children would get their equipment after all. The fire investigation concluded that Brody and Voss had died while attempting to destroy evidence of their crimes. Accelerant had been found throughout the cabin, along with financial documents and electronic devices. The case was closed as a homicide self-destruction, with Derek Voss listed as the primary suspect. Nobody questioned the mechanic who'd been married to one of the sufferers. Why would they? Ethan Brody was known as a simple, honest man who'd been devastated by his wife's betrayal. He deserved sympathy, not suspicion. At Claire's funeral, I sat in the front row and accepted condolences from neighbors and friends. They told me how sorry they were, how shocking the whole situation had been, how I deserved better than what she'd put me through. They were right. I did deserve better. After the service, I drove to the cemetery and watched them lower my wife's casket into the ground. 15 years of marriage reduced to a wooden box and a headstone that would eventually be covered by weeds. I loved you, I said to the grave. I really did, but love wasn't enough. It never had been. Love was just the lie people told themselves to justify staying with someone who didn't deserve their loyalty. I walked back to my truck and drove away without looking back. 6 months later, I was changing oil on a Honda Civic when Detective Reeves stopped by the garage. "How are you holding up, Ethan?" "One day at a time," I said. "Good to hear." "I wanted to thank you again for your help with the financial investigation. That anonymous tip about the offshore accounts made all the difference." "Anonymous tip?" "Someone called in the account numbers the night of the fire. Claimed to be a school janitor, but we never found anyone matching that description. Probably a concerned citizen who didn't want to get involved officially." "Probably," I said. "Anyway, the kids are getting their equipment. New wheelchairs, communication devices, therapy programs. Your wife would have been happy to see that." My wife. If only he knew what my wife would have been happy to see. "She would have," I said. Reeves left, and I went back to work. Honest work. The kind that didn't require lies or theft or betrayal. The kind that let me sleep peacefully at night. That evening, I drove past Millfield Elementary. Through the classroom windows, I could see children using the new equipment that had been purchased with the recovered stolen money. Wheelchairs and communication devices and therapy tools that would help them learn and grow and become productive members of society. They would never know that their equipment had been paid for with blood and fire. They would never know that sometimes justice required violence. They would never know that their town's simple mechanic had become something else entirely on a stormy night beside a lake. They didn't need to know. They just needed to be helped. I drove home to my empty house and made dinner for one. The silence didn't bother me anymore. Silence was honest. Silence didn't lie or steal or betray. Silence was the sound of a man who'd done what needed to be done and was finally at peace with himself. Outside my kitchen window, a campaign sign flickered in the streetlight. "Re-elect Derek Voss. Integrity you can count on." I smiled and raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. "Now there's only one honest man left," I said to the empty room.